that high-tech company in China, Huawei, which controls a lot of the cell phone technology on the planet, has inserted listening devices and other spying tools into many of their hardware pieces, and has used a variety of underhanded techniques in order to achieve hegemony of the Red Dragon, the communist Chinese government, the communist regime around the world. While President Trump a while back was overseas negotiating trade deals with China, the CFO of Huawei was being arrested in Canada, in British Columbia, on charges based on a variety of illegal acts. And it appears now that China is striking back, the Red Dragon is striking back, and their strategy is to bypass the U.S. intelligence agency, as indicated in the title of this article. So I know you'll join me in being shocked, as the Red Dragon was shocked, to hear that Huawei was spying, chuckle, chuckle, and the whole effort at that point, the Red Dragon was continuing to violate the sanctions that had been put in place against Iran, as the United States was attempting to bring us back from the brink of allowing Iran to develop nuclear assets in order for them to take out Israel, courtesy of former Secretary of State John Kerry and former President Barack Hussein Obama, who set up the no-deal Iran deal. No piece of paper signed, and nothing for the United States to get out of it other than annihilation of the great Satan after Iran would eliminate the little Satan. Little Satan is what Iran calls Israel, and the great Satan is what Iran calls the United States. And so as our former administration attempted to walk us off the plank and have us commit suicide through this phony Iran nonsense and the sending of $150 billion on cargo planes over to Iran so they could, with their fingers crossed, not build nuclear weapons with all that cash and not kick it back as bribes to leaders of the European Union states and most likely back to previous administration members. Who knows? So, what's been going on now in addition to this has got multiple layers of issues. One of them is illegal trade with Iran. The second one is the spying on citizens all over the world with Huawei technology. Again, they own a lot of the cell phone firms and have implanted bugs. All data goes back to the Red Dragon as it's developing its giant nationwide and then worldwide database of all things, kind of creating their own NSA structure. At the same time, there is this move to go to the next level of internet and cell phone technology, and that is the opening of a bigger pipeline for information through the rollout of the 5G technology. And Huawei has been running around the world convincing other countries to go with the technology that they are developing in that regard, but it is most likely just an effort for them, again, to achieve their China by 2025 plan of dominating the world within the next 6 years. And this would be one of their key attack profiles, would be to use this 5G technology against most countries, but particularly the United States. And again, it might surprise you to know that Huawei is probably just an arm of the Red Dragon's military machine, their spying machine to begin with. Of course, they won't admit that. But in communist China, there's a thin line between state and private ownership, and that is blurred all the time. You never know when you're dealing with a Chinese company whether you're really dealing with a representative of that organization, or if you're dealing with somebody that may be a part of that organization but has a higher allegiance to the Red Dragon itself. So with that in mind, Huawei has used its strategy in order to not only spy on the world through its own technology, but now it sees an opportunity, now that this CFO of Huawei was arrested, for the Red Dragon to actually turn the tables, or attempt to, and strike a blow against freedom by using the court system. Again, you always use, as any of these martial arts programs will teach you, is you always use your opponent's advantages against them, their size, their weight, or whatever. You use that in order to defeat your enemy by using their assets as your assets. And what the Red Dragon was attempting to do then now, or is attempting to do now, is to use the court system to sue us in return, sue the United States government for having arrested the CFO that was involved in violating the Iranian sanctions and other things, and to use this as a tool to attack our security services, to use discovery and other techniques during this lawsuit in order to reveal our secrets and our techniques, which they then, the Red Dragon, would use in order to destroy us. The Red Dragon never sleeps. It always comes up with new ways to destroy its enemies. It always uses the assets of its enemies against its enemy. And that's what they are trying to do in this case. But I believe, if you believe Q-Team and the expanded definition of the term of the wall, inferring that President Trump is not only trying to protect us by the building of a wall along our southern border with Mexico, but also a bigger wall. And maybe that wall is enabling American technology companies to come up with the 5G structure, which is required in order for us to compete. Around the globe, we have to be able to operate at the same speed that everybody else is dealing with. And if we don't move up from 4G up to 5G, we will be left behind. A lot of the technology of the future, the development of manufacturing structures and so on for the future will all be driven through 5G instead of 4G. But if we can de-weaponize what the Huawei people were going to roll out, in other words, have American companies develop their own 5G technology and have us then roll that out at least within our own country to protect ourselves so we don't have to fall prey to whatever little Trojan horses or other little mechanisms of destruction that the Red Dragon has inserted within its 5G technology solution, but use our own, and therefore, once again, have not only a barrier wall between us and the invasion forces coming from the deep state by foot, but also have a wall that protects the Red Dragon and the other deep state actors from coming at us through the airwaves. Pamela Geller in the Geller Report continues to do this outstanding reporting on the threats that are coming at us around the globe from the spread of Islam. Her most recent article, an ISIS jihadi has returned to Sweden to treat war wounds with health care paid for by taxpayers. Again, multiple layers of interest here. The first one is that Sweden has surrendered to the jihadis and is setting itself up for complete and total self-annihilation, suicide. And they are doing it by not having the indigenous Swedes not producing new children, the indigenous Swedes being replaced by the invasion force from the Middle East and North Africa, the indigenous Swedes being murdered, tortured, and especially the women raped, tortured, and murdered. And at the same time, then, these Middle Easterners and North Africans that invade into Sweden then get the hots to go back to their homeland and wage jihad against all Western nations, all non-believers. And when they maybe get wounded on the battlefield, they will turn around and where do they go for universal health care? Well, the ISIS isn't going to give it to them, and it's probably with rusty knives and dirty bandages, pre-used bandages. So what do? They run home. In this case, it would be a jihadi returning home to quote-unquote home, his temporary home until he destroys the new home, Sweden, and to use their welfare system in order for him to walk into the local ER, say, look, I've got this little wound. I was cooking something on the stove and things went wrong, and so I really need some attention here. And of course, the Swedes won't ask, and even if they were to ask and they were to find out that it was a war wound that was suffered by someone that had invaded their country, had set up shop, had decided to go back and to do things to kill Westerners back from whence they came, and then got wounded on that battlefield and came back to Sweden, their guilt complex would prevent them from being able to take any preventative action in order to deal with that in an appropriate way, such as incarcerate the jihadi, send the jihadi back to the battlefield and let him get treated by the ISIS medics, if they have any. But one of the reasons why I brought this article up is not only the irony, it's not funny what the Swedes are doing to themselves and other countries within the European Union are doing. Thank God we have passionate patriots in places like Hungary and Poland that are not going to allow their countries to be destroyed the way that the UK, with the Pakistani Islamists that they've let in to groom, kidnap, torture, and murder their little girls, and at the same time for those jihadis to produce 6 to 8 kids per wife. They're allowed 4 wives each. The Islamist is, by the Quran, allowed 4 wives, and that's just for real wives. And he's also allowed these temporary wives, and he's also allowed to rape and do whatever he wants to the infidels. And if they produce his offspring, then here's just a little mixed blood jihadi for the future generation. So these are people that mercilessly rape, behead, and massacre their way from one end of ISIS to the other, but then return to Sweden if they have a little boo-boo on the battlefield and need it treated. And so they'll go to a state-run hospital and get it treated for free at that free. Nothing is free, so just the Swedish taxpayers absorb this if you can. The Swedish taxpayers allow people to come in from another part of the world from a culture that's completely adverse to their own culture. They won't speak up against it because they have this guilt complex that prevents them from understanding reality and dealing with truth. So they allow those people to become part of that society. Those people immediately spit on them, steal all their stuff, destroy their systems, cost the welfare state the hundreds of millions of dollars then that the taxpayers, the indigenous population, have to pay for. Those jihadis run back to their real home, and create trouble, and if they then become wounded, they come back to Sweden and get treated. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is not just what the Swedes have decided to allow themselves to suffer through, with the end product of this absolutely being the end of the country of Sweden. It will be Swedistan. It's headed in that direction. The indigenous population of Sweden apparently doesn't care, or doesn't understand, or has been induced into some kind of coma or drunk the leftist Kool-Aid to believe that this is the right way to do things. But think of this. If the Democrats, the Democrats in the United States of America prevail, and we have open borders, and we have Medicare for all, think of the initiatives that are being pushed by the radical Justice Democrats, quote unquote, people like AOC, and if they get their way, then the United States will end up with this being its future, with the exact same situation taking place with these Middle Eastern and North African males coming to the United States, as they are already coming right now, but in much greater numbers. And then immediately waging war here and killing us, but at the same time sending some of the people back to their homeland and continuing to wage war against the infidel there. And what would prevent them then from wounds on the battlefield, coming right across that open border, returning to the United States, and going to one of our ER rooms and being treated the exact same way that this jihadi is being treated in Sweden? So once again, if you think you are being kind-hearted, if you think that leftist propositions, that this Medicare for all, open borders slate, these entire self-destructive annihilation down the road techniques, these ways to mismanage and destroy yourself are actually the way you should live, this is what's coming your way. And in Sweden, I'll read a couple quotes, "We don't judge people. We provide care according to the medical need and without looking at what a person is or what they have done," this doctor told a newspaper. "We give care to rich and poor, to murderers and people sitting in prison. If people need to be punished, there are other parts of society that can do that. Name me one in Sweden. Healthcare should not become part of the apparatus of punishment." So, frogs in the water, the heat is being turned up, it's already at the boiling point. Absolutely, the Swedes from all walks of life, all professions, apparently their medical people have now given in to their future, are caving in to the fact that they will be ground to dust, but they'll go into the grave believing that they did so for the right reason. Of course, it's the wrong reason, but let them live in their own little fantasies. This article from Breitbart is interesting. It talks about how President Trump met with reporters from Breitbart the other day, had a roundtable discussion in the Oval Office, and he was asked about what is going on as far as the Mexican cartels, whether it's the administration were going to designate these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And President Trump clearly indicated to this group of journalists from Breitbart that yes, we've been thinking about it seriously for a long time, and that we are headed in that direction, and it will be not a minute too soon the moment that we designate these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. For Mexico has totally lost control, not only of both southern and northern border, but they've also within their country have completely and totally lost control within their borders. There are 42,000 murders last year in Mexico, and it's considered now one of the most unsafe places in the world. they are continuing to reach out an olive branch to these invasion forces that are coming from Honduras and are laced with terrorists, MS-13 gang members, and yes, jihadis from the Middle East and North Africa. And Mexico is apparently offering a lot of these people sanctuary, the ability to stay in Mexico. Do not ask me why and what is going on with that. But President Trump, who had visited the border earlier this year, had been there with Senators Ted Cruz and John Cornyn, and realized just how dangerous things are down at the border. Don't tell Rand Paul. So he's still convinced that this is not an emergency on our border. And apparently, I don't know if he's going to sign up for the open borders agenda of the Democrats. But we still have this situation where the drugs, the cartels are not getting better. They are getting worse, to the point now that the Los Zetas is being run. This is one of the nastiest cartels, and there are many of them now in Mexico, is being run by an even more dangerous person than before. So you can arrest an El Chapo, who is a homicidal sociopath and murdering thug. And when you get rid of him, unfortunately, it appears that his position will be taken by somebody that's even worse, if that's possible, on the scale of inhumanity. But as these drug cartels are running around Latin America, Mexico, are continuing to stream their drugs, they have now branched out into human trafficking. Everything that they are doing will bring this country down unless we stop it immediately and push these people back over the border where they belong. It continues to be a no-win situation, and as long as we allow the no-win situation to become worse, we are going to go by the way of the dodo, and that's what the people like AOC want. They want us to be completely crushed and replaced by this utopian vision they have, turning us into Venezuela. But even some people in the media are finally turning around. I guess they don't want to die. They were perfectly willing for Kate Steinle to die, but maybe at a certain point they get the idea that maybe we should start to try to protect ourselves. So if the press starts to come around and starts to honestly report on what's going down on the border and what these cartels are all about, even though they would be doing damage to the now Democrat Party, as people like Janet Napolitano, when she was governor of Arizona, and Dennis Burke, who was the attorney general in Arizona, apparently worked out some kinds of deals. There was even Nancy Pelosi seen down south of the border with leaders of the Mexican government that may just be shadow government overlords of the cartels themselves, like former President Carlos Salinas, that appears to be running an entire cartel out of his garage. But Janet Napolitano and Dennis Burke and others allowed, when this Fast and Furious was going on and other activities that were igniting the border war and fueling the human trafficking / gun running / drug running activity along the border, have now allowed us to get to the point where we're in a do or die situation. The open border is not the answer. The open border is the coup de grace. And as soon as other people wake up and realize that and take action, support President Trump for the completion of that border wall, taking the other measures that need to be taken in order to secure our border, to get a logical, a common sense budget passed so that these issues can be dealt with. Until then, we're in grave danger. The Daily Signal reports that there's immediate harm to millions, according to the AFL-CIO, as it tears apart the Green New Deal. So this is interesting. Once again, the Democrat Party is now a combination of communists, criminals, and fascists and Islamists. And you add that in a blender, and you sprinkle in some AOC, and you give it, you put it on high speed, you end up with what's going on now in the United States as the Green New Deal and other leftist proposals are being pushed. What the Democrats now, did not understand is that one of their biggest supporting blocks over the years has been the unions. And the unions, though, started to come around when President Trump ran for office in 2016. He had good relationships with many people in the unions due to what he had done in his previous life, becoming a real estate magnate and builder extraordinaire. And so he had, over the years, built some strong relationships with members of some of these trade unions. And so now the Democrats are leaving their unions behind in where they're headed, because the unions have actually, maybe they're the only ones, have actually read the words that are on paper for this Soylent Green New Deal. And even though the leaders of the Democrat Party seem to be lockstep behind their new fearless leader, Ocasio-Cortez, and on Friday, during our Open Mind Friday broadcast, we will reveal exactly what AOC and the people behind her are all about. But that's for another day. Tune in then. In the meantime, the unions have read between the lines in the Green New Deal and have realized that all this will do for their union members, the construction trades and others, is this will destroy the economy. And if the economy is destroyed, they will go down with it. So even if we tear down every house in the country, every standing structure in the country to be replaced with green technology, there will still, through the chaos, in order to achieve some of the goals of Soylent Green New Deal, it will destroy many of the jobs of these union members. And so now you have the members of the AFL-CIO speaking out loudly against this initiative that's being put forward by the radical left. It'll be interesting to see what happens during the 2020 election with all of these factions now that are going to stream away, run away from the former Democrat Party and what is now the Democrat Party in order to now hopefully coalesce into a pro-United States, passionate patriot faction that strengthens President Trump and enables him to be reelected in 2020. And just when you think that Ocasio-Cortez hasn't stepped over enough lines, the New York Post reports to us that a company, and no, it's not true. See, I thought that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't have any business experience. Well, apparently she does. She founded a company 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago, and it turns out that that company owes $1,870 in back taxes. So she had started an organization back in 2012. It was called Brook Avenue Press. It was a company that she founded in order to publish children's books in the Bronx. Apparently this was before she was recruited by the Justice Democrats. And again, tune in on Friday if you want to know more about exactly where she's coming from. But back then, she was trying to carve out her own little niche by running this book company. But the state of New York has slapped that company as of 2 years ago, with a year and a half ago, with a warrant. And this was just after she announced her candidacy, but apparently they were able to cover that up until she got in office, for back taxes. And apparently what she was trying to do is operate that business as if it were a nonprofit when it was actually a for-profit institution. Think of, once again, the irony of this. Can you think of some other prominent Democrat who for decades has been running an enormous for-profit organization, running it as if it were a charitable organization, and after billions of dollars have been pulled in, including $145 million from the Russians, as the Uranium One deal was allowed to go through by CFIUS, the board that approves these foreign agreements. 20% of the American uranium was pushed to the Russians in violation of American law on a variety of levels, and that was okayed through a board, and one of the board members at the time that helped push it through was one, Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State. And do you not believe that on a huge scale, the Clinton Foundation, compared to what Ocasio-Cortez has been doing, Brook Avenue Press is just a pimple on that creature. And it'll be interesting if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does incur some blowback for running this company as if it were a nonprofit, but it was actually for-profit, running up some tax debt that has not been paid. And if she is held to task for, in comparative terms, this is nothing compared to the Clinton Foundation. But just imagine if they take action against Ocasio-Cortez. Don't you think she'll demand that since she has absolutely no allegiance really to the current Democrat Party, she is aligned with the Justice Democrats, which is a whole new beast. Again, tune in Friday. We will see how this whole thing unfolds. OAN, One American News Network, shines some light on some other darkness going on out there in the quote-unquote, you'd think, nonprofit world, but actually turns out to be for-profit. So, dozens of actresses, executives are charged in college admissions cheating scandal. Well, that's interesting. And of course, where's this happening? Let's see. California. So in California, we have some members of the Hollywood community who gathered together, and this is a scheme that was orchestrated by one William Rick Singer. It's a for-profit college prep business based in California, but they were trying to disguise it as a charity. They collected $25 million from parents, and they were trying to bribe administrators and coaches to get their children into top universities, including the Ivy League schools and some of the premier schools even on the West Coast. So, cheating on tests, pooling their money, pretending it to be a charity. It's actually a for-profit organization. It's a complete and total scam. And so now the District Attorney of Massachusetts is announcing indictments, and we're talking about bribery and a whole lot of other crimes going on here that implicate a variety of administrators, coaches at elite schools, and even parents who are a party to this. And we'll see how this shakes out and how those innocent actresses, and how those actresses, and I don't know, after Jussie Smollett and his 16 felony counts for what he did, I wonder what will happen to these actresses. And if they escape without any felony counts, would Jussie Smollett have a bone of contention if these white female actresses are allowed off the hook with what they're doing, and if black male actor Jussie Smollett is held to task for what he did? Where's the real racism coming from? We'll find out, I think. And finally, the Washington Free Beacon provides a little ray of hope on the Second Amendment front. Massachusetts Attorney General has been attempting to limit Second Right amendments in that state, in the state of Massachusetts, and had requested that a suit that had been filed against her decision to unilaterally redefine assault weapons, she wanted that action to be stayed, but the court has ruled that it will not, that the federal case deals with factors beyond those at hand in the state case. In essence, the judge ruled that the Attorney General of the state of Massachusetts then cannot, on her own volition, change a decades-old assault ban, the language therein, and reinterpret it in the way she wanted the definition to be applied. And so she has failed in court to pursue her action in order to expand the definition of what is an assault rifle to suit her leftist desires. And the court has ruled that the action that Attorney General Healy took was unconstitutional, would be impossible to force because the meaning of what she was trying to do would be unclear. But that could have been on purpose, who knows. A way to get all guns banned is to confuse everyone about what the classification of a particular weapon is. She exceeded her authority, deprived gun retailers of their due process protections under the 5th and 14th Amendment, and so she has been slapped by the court, and we pray that these actions to protect our rights, not only the Second Amendment, but also the First and all the other amendments, to protect us from these leftist incursions upon not only the Constitution, but all of our rights within the Bill of Rights. Thank you for watching, and God bless. And now the DC Hammer Show is available as an audio podcast. Just go to Podcast Garden or iTunes and search for DC Hammer or News Narrative Analysis Associates, NNAA.